Hi, I'm Claire, and this is my Summer Bridge mock teaching video application. So today we're going to be learning the difference between a simile and a metaphor. Now, I personally love writing, but I know that not everyone does, so hopefully the activities that we'll do today will help you come up with more creative and fun ways to write, and then you'll enjoy it more, like I do. So we're going to start with a quick activity. So what are some things that are red? As red as anything.
Apple?
As red as an apple, perfect. Hillary?
A stop sign?
As red as a stop sign. Anything else? It could be as creative or silly as you want.
M&M.
As red as an M&M, perfect. One more?
A lobster.
As red as a lobster, perfect. Now these are examples of similes, which we're going to talk about in a second. But similes and metaphors are called figurative language. And there are a bunch of techniques that writers use in movies, books, songs, really anything, in order to make things a little bit more complex and more interesting than just saying it was red. You can say it was as red as a lobster. And suddenly there's so many more elements brought in to the piece that you're writing. So, the first example that we have is a simile. And a simile is a comparison between two dissimilar things using like or as. So in the example that we just did, as red as an apple, that is using as, so it would be a simile because you're comparing an apple to something red. And it could be really as simple or as complex, as funny or as serious as you want. So we're going to take a look at a quick example, a poem called I Love School. So if you guys grab your little handouts and read along with me. I love school like a kick in the shins. I love school like a zit on my skin. I love school like a teacher who spits. And I love school like a punch on the nose. So, does anybody have some similes that they see in that little poem?
I love school like a teacher who spits.
Great! So what are the two things that are being compared in that poem?
School and a teacher that spits.
Great! So you can tell in this poem that the speaker doesn't really love school because he's comparing it to something, a teacher who spits. Nobody would like a teacher who spits. So by comparing the two things that don't really seem similar at first, using, in this example, like, it becomes a simile. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so.
So a metaphor is a little bit more confusing than a simile because it's comparing two dissimilar things as though one is actually the other. So you're not using like or as in this example. And it sounds a little bit confusing at first, but I always think of the snake example. And if I wanted to say a simile, I could say a river is like a snake because it like winds through the forest and things like that. But if I was going to use a metaphor, the river would be a snake. I would just say a river is a snake and it's winding through the forest because you're actually saying that the river is becoming the snake. I know that's a little bit confusing at first, but we're going to look at an example poem again and see if we can find some metaphors in there.
Okay.
So this is a family metaphor. My family lives inside a medicine chest. Dad is the supersized Band-Aid, strong and powerful, but not always effective in a crisis. Mom is the middle-sized tweezer, which picks and pokes and pinches. David is the single small aspirin on the third shelf, sometimes ignored. Muffin, the sheepdog, is a round cotton ball, stained and dirty, that pops off the shelf and bounces in my way as I open the door. And I am the wood and glue which holds us all together with my love. So does anybody see any metaphors in that poem?
Dad is the supersized Band-Aid?
Good! Now what are the two things being compared that are not exactly similar?
The dad and a Band-Aid?
Perfect, because they're both strong and powerful but not always effective in a crisis. So you're comparing two things that are not exactly the same, and you're not using like or as, because if you were, that would be called a simile. So just off the top of your head, does anybody have any quick examples of what their family could be compared to in a structure kind of like this poem?
My dog is a teddy bear.
Perfect. You're saying your dog is cuddly and soft and nice, and that all comes out in the teddy bear metaphor. If you were saying my dog is like a teddy bear, that would be a simile. But because you're saying my dog is a teddy bear, that would be a metaphor. And I wrote a poem like this a few years ago when I was learning the differences between similes and metaphors. And I said my family was a tree, and I was the branches holding them all together. So that's just another little quick example that would help you learn the difference between the two. So basically, just to wrap up everything, a simile is a comparison between two dissimilar things using like or as, and a metaphor is almost the same thing but without using like or as. So you're pretending that one object is becoming the other. So if you guys want to write anything new, try using these techniques and see if you can come up with some creative and fun similes and metaphors to make your writing just a little bit more interesting. And if you guys wanted a fun homework assignment, a lot of songs have similes and metaphors in them just to make them a little bit more complex and deeper. So if you guys want to print out a copy of the lyrics to one of your favorite songs and try to find some similes and metaphors, let's say 2 to 3, and bring them into next class and we'll talk about them. Thanks.